Hello, everyone, and welcome to our continuing education series. Today, we are going to continue the discussion about whether or not your child is being denied FAPE. And in doing so, we are going to talk about accommodations, basically from pre-K through college. And the most important thing to remember is what triggers the IDEA is if an institution of learning is receiving any federal funding. So especially in the college arena, people always ask me, well, it's a private school, they don't receive any federal funding. Well, chances are they probably do. If they are providing any aid to students, it could be, free lunch, it could be subsidizing their housing with federal funds, it could be it could be supports and accommodations. If there are Pell Grants, that's considered federal funding. So that would make the provisions of the IDEA, if the learner qualifies due to their age, they would be required to do some supports and accommodations. Of course, some schools receive very few, but some do receive very little Fed funding, if any, of those private schools. Most of those are parochial because they're receiving money from the archdiocese instead of the federal government. So before we get into the accommodations, though, I wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of things as we talk about school, continue to talk about school, and that's what school is going to look like in the fall. Basically, the only school district that has formally announced its plans is the West Bloomfield School District at this point, and they're planning on doing I believe they have around 5,700 students, and they're planning on doing, they're splitting them in half, and they'll be, like Monday and Tuesday will be online for half, and Monday and Tuesday will be face-to-face for the other half. Wednesday, there will be no school. It will be a disinfecting day for the buildings, and there may be online classes available on that day. I wasn't certain when I read it, but then they'll switch, and the onliners from Monday and Tuesday will go face-to-face on Thursday and Friday, and the face-to-facers on Monday and Tuesday will go online for Thursday and Friday. It's not ideal. It is going to cost a fortune. There has been a huge cut in educational funding by the federal government and by the state because of all of the money that had to go to COVID testing and providing the basic necessities to different entities throughout our state. We also lost a ton of money because people weren't paying sales tax, and people that usually help to fund schools, and people, because no place was open, they weren't playing the lottery as often, and all of those things. So as we go towards this distance learning face-to-face model, which it's anticipated will be partially, the online will be partially a Zoom and partially actually doing work online and independent work. They'll be establishing activities, they'll have routine, and there will be equitable access is what they're calling it to learning for all students. They haven't really distinguished in any of the plans for special ed versus gen ed. So that will be, I would assume, coming in the next couple of days. The biggest issue with all of this is that, especially with younger students, it will be very hard for them to sit in front of a computer for I think it's 4 hours a day. And once you release them from their learning model to let them, do other stuff, whether it's eating lunch or running around and playing a game, going outside, then I think it will be challenging to get them back into wherever the computer is to continue their learning. It's obviously also a factor for working parents. And if the kids aren't old enough or responsible enough to stay home and do this at home, what's going to happen to those parents if the kids are not back in brick and mortar school? And which again leads us to the original problem of funding. If parents aren't making money, they certainly cannot afford to maintain unemployment. It's going to run out at some point. That's the other reason Michigan has less funding, is because we have over 1 million people on unemployment. And so that is a pretty scary state of economic affairs in our state right now. And so, but the plan from Governor Whitmer is for, as of June 30th, she will release the Michigan Return to School Roadmap, and she'll provide details on what will be required and what will be recommended for schools. It's anticipated that the reason that other districts haven't released their plan is because they're waiting to see exactly what the governor is going to order them to do or enact, or what measures have to be in place, so that they can then look at their own budgets and see what their funding will allow. Obviously, if there are students who do not have access to computers or to internet, that all has to be considered, and it's going to have to be provided, which is why this is going to cost a lot of money. There are 25 people on the Governor's Return to Learn Advisory Council, and they're ranging from parents, teachers, educators, administrators, congressmen, and it seems from the little bit that's been published on it that at this point, school districts are going to have a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, they're also going to need a lot of money. The scary part of today's updates is that yesterday was the 4th consecutive day where we had over 200 new COVID-19 cases in Michigan. We actually had 255 cases yesterday, and we had over 20 deaths, which brings us to 5,843 deaths, and that means 61,084 cases of COVID-19 in Michigan. As you know, we are only one of 3 states that is now green or has successfully, temporarily contained the virus. So kudos to our governor and the extreme measures she took during great times of adversity. So now moving on to our topic for today. So part of a free and appropriate education is that the playing field is leveled between students with special needs and the general education curriculum, so that the curriculum can be achieved by all students. Notice that it's a free and appropriate public education. It's not a free and the greatest, best, most incredible education. So if your child is gifted, it doesn't mean that they get all the supports to be, straight A students. They get all the supports to achieve academic success. So accommodations have to be in writing. They should be part of the IEP. They cannot be enforced if they're not in writing. I'm going to start with the college accommodations because they're the easiest because most colleges don't have to provide them. What I've found is, and I'll kind of give you the list in a minute, but first, the law says that the Americans with Disabilities Act was established so no person with a disability would be discriminated against. It states that reasonable accommodations must be made for any individual with a disability. The ADA protects anyone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of their major life activities. It could be physical, sensory, or health-related disabilities, psychological disorders, attention disorders, and learning disabilities. Reasonable accommodations must be made, but colleges don't have to fundamentally alter programs or reduce academic standards for any student. The appropriate accommodations will be determined based on the disability and the individual's needs. It is the student's responsibility to inform the college of the disability, which means that they don't have to do child find. They're not obligated to say, hey, we think you have a learning issue, let's help you. It's up to the student to go to, there's a disability office on every college campus, and they need to go and they need to self-advocate. Some of the accommodations that can be considered for college, and then hopefully I'll remember to tell you what to do if the college doesn't offer any. That has been really, really successful for my clients. So if I don't say that, somebody put it in the message to remind me. But some of the accommodations available in the college setting are extended test-taking time, having a note taker, recording lecture classes, preferred seating near the learning source. We never say preferred seating at the front of the room or by the teacher because the teacher isn't always in the front of the room and they're not always being taught by a teacher. Sometimes it's a slideshow or a PowerPoint or video. So we always just say learning source. Being able to take short breaks during lecture to alleviate symptoms. A lot of kids with anxiety tend to, or with attention issues too, they tend to lose focus and they get so antsy that they can't concentrate. It's disruptive to the educational environment. So arranging for short breaks for those students, allowing them to get up and go in the hallway or walk around or whatever. The testing in a reduced distraction site, like a different quiet area, testing center, place where there's less students, having a reader or utilizing screen reading software for tests, allowing extra time to get to class if people have mobility issues. You can have an accommodation for absences that are due to the disability, such as if someone has a chronic illness. They can have extensions on assignments, having handouts in electronic format or enlarged text. They can subscribe to audio textbooks. They can have an ASL, sign language interpreter for classes and tutoring. They can have no penalty for spelling errors if it's in-class work. They can have extended time on assignments when the student communicates in advance to the instructor. They can use adaptive technology such as screen readers, smart pens, or braille printer. They can test in smaller sections of the test, meaning they don't take the whole test at one time. They take section 1, and then maybe an hour later they take section 2, and then an hour later they take section 3. That's just an example. They might do it over multiple days. I know that some students who I've worked with, they took their ACT one section per day every day for 6 days. So it really just depends. A lot of times, more times than not, I should say, students go to the disability office in college and are told there's nothing we can do. we're too big, we're too small, we don't have the people, we don't have the support, there's nothing we can do. In that instance, encouraging your student to go and talk to their college professors, explain their disability, give them a copy of their last IEP from high school, giving them, or their 504 plan, which hopefully, since I've now said it every day for 3 months, is in writing. And just having a conversation with the different professors is going to make it easier for your child to get what they need. Remember, the professors want your child to succeed, so they're going to give them whatever not break necessarily, but courtesy they can to ensure success. They should also think about meeting with their professor once a week and just check in, hey, this is how it's going. On that last assignment, I was up, all night long. I don't think it was my best work because I couldn't manage my time and I got really flipped out. And I mean, once a week, college students should be checking in with their professors to talk about if the accommodations are working and if there's other ones that they need. And depending on the assignment, it might be different. They might have different needs. So certainly keep that all in mind. I have an IEP goal page that I use to help people pick out their accommodations. We go through materials, assignments, testing adaptations, presentation of the subject matter, time management, motivation, reinforcement, academic aids, handwriting aids, environmental aids, socialization supports, and things at home. It's very, very important that if students are using a special kind of device to learn in the classroom, they're using the same device at home. If anyone wants a copy of the accommodation checklist, certainly we are happy to provide that. Just send us a message and we'll send it out to you. But we talk about different instructional methods and materials. Kids who struggle with understanding information, who can understand the information but they can't read the materials. Students who are deaf or blind or hard of hearing. Students who have difficulty just getting ready for the lesson because of organizational deficits, and students who need help during the lesson, students who need help after the lesson. And we go through all those different accommodations. If someone just wants a consultation and we go through all these checklists with you before your IEP meeting and give you some of the creative solutions, name it. Like a student can't ever get their homework out of their backpack and into the teacher's hand. We have some helpful hints for that. We can help students have kind of a roadmap to get through a multi-step or more complex assignment. Just different approaches to really everything. So when you're looking at, or thinking about accommodations, you have to look at a couple of different things. You have to look at how much the child can handle on their own independently. And for little kids, that's nothing. Are they better in small groups or whole groups? Are they better verbally or reading or just or viewing? Which sense helps them learn the best? There's the Michigan Department of Education published in August of 2010, yes, it's that old, a supplementary aids and services tips for developing a quality and compliant IEP. The IDEA has been updated since this August 2010 publication by the Michigan Department of Education, but it still does have some good supplementary aids and services, and it has some good websites to the Michigan regulations, so that's also helpful. In that same quick reference guide, there's a section on assessments and different kinds of assessments. I don't think it's absolutely up to date, as I said, but what it does is it talks about the assessments. For example, let's use one that we see a lot. So for district-wide assessments and alternate assessments, the expectation for completing the rationale should be consistent throughout the IEP. And then the accommodations section says that it just needs to say that they'll be consistent throughout the IEP and include the MME, the ELPA, the MEEP, the NAEP, all of those tests, the WIDA, the M-STEP. So all of those assessments, the child should be given, or the student should be given, they're the same accommodations for testing that they get on regular classroom testing. A lot of these, however, are longer than regular classroom testing. So there may need to be that amendment or modification to accommodate the length of the test, the number of sections, and the different amount of subject matter. When you're talking about accommodations on standardized tests, it's very, very important, if your child is going to need them on an SAT or an ACT, that those accommodations have to be in place for at least, I believe it's 18 months. It may be a year, before you can apply to get those accommodations on the SAT and ACT. So very, very, very important to include standardized test provisions in every IEP, and what those are going to be. Again, the sky's the limit. Is it a read aloud? Is it a speaking screen? Is it a smart pen? Whatever it might be. Is it Braille? And so those are just really, really good things to keep in mind. There's also, there can be accommodations put in place for younger students. And I'm just looking for my cheat sheet. If you give me a second. Otherwise, I'll just do it off the top of my head. 1 second. Okay, we're just gonna do it off the top of my head, not use my cheat sheet. So the most important thing to remember is that you want to put everything in place to help your child succeed to the best of their ability for an appropriate education. Make sure expectations are in line when you go into the IEP meeting. As we talked about last Thursday, it's really, really important that you understand your child's disability and that you understand how they learn and what their impediments are to learning. Because only then can you truly understand which accommodations are the most important to fight for. For example, if you have a child who has some sort of processing delay, it's going to be really, really important that they have a way to hear it, see it, and write it as fast as the class is going. So there are accommodations in place. One of them is a smart pen. I love this. I love, love, love this. A smart pen is a pen that writes on special paper. And when your student is taking notes on the paper, the pen is recording the lesson. So after class, the student can then go back, read through their notes, and then something's missing. They take the pen, they put it down on the paper. It will go immediately to the place on the recording where the student is pointing on their paper, and it will repeat it so that they can fill in their notes to make them complete. Another thing that we see is teachers provide their notes to the student ahead of time, or prepare their PowerPoint with a note-taking section and give that to the student ahead of time. It allows the student to review it with either a parent or an aide, or just by themselves if they're able to do that. And they can and be more productive when they're actually in class during the lesson. Another thing that that is really helpful is obviously extra time. In certain circumstances, material is taught to mastery as opposed to completion. So if a child has an attention issue and cannot possibly complete a 1-hour test, they can, through data, they can figure out, maybe this particular child needs to take 3 tests that are shorter, and if the child gets above a certain grade, which is considered mastery, it doesn't matter that it wasn't completed. So you can be really flexible, you can be really creative. Another helpful thing are for, if you remember, I think it was last Monday or Tuesday, I think, we talked about the 4 different kinds of learners. That would, depending on what kind of learner your child is, combined with their disability, is going to also be really important to identify the accommodations. Kids who are very young are going to do more things with blocks, with Play-Doh, with coloring. They may trace their letters. They might do hand-to-hand. They're going to have a lot more occupational therapy than older kids to develop those fine and gross motor skills. They're going to have a lot more speech and language. They're going to have different approaches to learning sight words that can help them learn to read. It may be that they're flashcards. It may be that they're cued with pictures. It may be that they're cued with it being used in a sentence. I mean, very, very often we hear kids use words that they have no idea what they mean. The F-bomb being a perfect example. When you see a little kid, say that, obviously they're using it perfectly in context because that's how they heard it from the grown-ups, but they don't know what it means. And so those are, some things in that area. With math, some kids use a calculator. Some kids don't use a calculator. Some kids are very visual and they're drawing dots. There's all different things that can be used. There are supports for speech and language. There's different making sentences out of pictures, then making the same sentence out of words, then finding those words in random text. There's all different ways to help develop those skills in younger kids. As students get older, some of the, test-taking strategies begin to become important, whether it's extra time, quiet space, small group, different sections on different days. Those are just to name a few. There's also can be where, like, if you have a child who has difficulty understanding instructions, then they may take their tests with an instructor, whether it's a counselor or a teacher or a special ed coordinator, and they would then be there for the child to say, I don't understand what these instructions mean, or to go through all the instructions with the child before each section of the test, or all the instructions at the beginning. It just depends. Other things that children can have are if they, depending on where they are with their motor skills, there are different just different devices, different stimuli that can help with that. Having a screen reader, having a person who reads the tests out loud, having the child dictate, and then it's transcribed. If they're better at verbalizing out loud than communicating or verbalizing on paper. If they need organizational assistance, there can be a check-in, check-out person. This is someone who's appointed and assigned to them. They should have the same person for all the time that they need this service, if it's from 9 through 12 or K through 5 or whatever it is. And this is the first person they see in the morning, and they go through, just so the child is like on the same page for the day. You're going to go to first hour, it's math. You're going to turn in your math homework. Do you have your math homework? Let's put it here. And, and then as they get older, it becomes more and more of a routine, and it's less fixing by the check-in, check-out person, but more and more responsibility and independence is given to the student. Also, the check-in, check-out person can also be responsible for making sure that if the student is keeping a journal, if they have a homework log, if they have a planner, making sure that everything is in the planner, that it's in there correctly. If the student has to request extra time, that the check-in, check-out person can make sure that it's actually on the planner or the calendar, or where the time deadline is before that test, where they have to decide if they need extra time or not. So check-in, that's the check-in person. The check-out person is like, okay, tomorrow you have these classes. You have this homework that's due in these classes. Do you have your book? Do you have your worksheet? Do you know how to log on to Quizlet, whatever it is? So that's really helpful too. The checkout person. And as I said, as they get older, then the checkout person is more like just watching to make sure that they're going through the exercise of organizing and preparing what they need to take home and what they need the next day. And the student becomes more and more autonomous as they get older. Other things that, just depending on what the child needs, things are going to be different. If someone has trouble with outbursts, for example, there may be, a code word where the student can tell the teacher, I feel myself, getting to that point, ladybug, and, they just say ladybug, and they're allowed to get up and get a pass and go to their appointed, cool off person. So really it can be, the sky's the limit as to what accommodations can be. And I think the best thing to do is to have a really, really great understanding of your child's disability, and not just how they need to be taught, but what kind of learner they are. And as I said, we are big fans of checklists in this office. And I think that every parent should have a blank copy of the IEP document before they go into the IEP meeting, so that they already are thinking about what their child needs. They can put it in the appropriate section, so it's not like there's more time being spent there, because we're going to have a great debate over whether or not they're going to have a 4x4 screen or a 15x15 screen. So there, and also, don't ever forget that parents, you can ask for any evaluation you think your child needs. If you think that they are falling behind in speech and language, you can ask for a comprehensive speech and language evaluation. And there should be recommendations in that evaluation for individual accommodations for your student. Assistive technology evaluations. That could be anything from, like I said, the readers. It could be the pen, the magic pen that I love so much. It could be having tests out loud. It could be having access to watch the PowerPoints later. So there's some, computer available to do that. Assistive technology can be when you use the Bluetooth technology, where the teacher has something around their neck and the child has earbuds in, and literally the teacher is speaking right into their ears, so they don't have to struggle to make out what the teacher is saying if they have a hearing impairment. They don't have to struggle to try to read lips or any of that stuff. It goes right into their ears. It's the coolest thing ever. And when kids are really little, their little earbuds are rubber, and they come in pink and purple and blue and yellow, and very, very kid-friendly. I'm going to end today by telling you a great story about a really special kid. He was, I first met him when he was in the last year of pre-kindergarten or preschool. And he had a hearing impairment as a result of some health issues that he had as a baby. It was from medication and some of the other treatments that he had. He wasn't born hearing impaired. And he, as we went through, school, and he got older and older, in fourth grade, they have a disability day. That's an awareness day where students, fourth graders, learn all about different disabilities. There's different stations. For example, they put on a blindfold and they have to do certain tasks to feel like what it's like to be blind, or they have to, have noise canceling headphones on and get to see what that experience is. They spend a day in a wheelchair. They it's just all different things to understand disabilities, whatever they are. And it's a really phenomenal program that was, I think it was first initiated by Jimmy Carter many, many years ago. But it happens in fourth grade across the country. And this particular little boy said to my son, I don't understand why hearing is here. Like, why is that a disability? And it was just, so my son came home and he asked me the question. And it was just so amazing to me that because these particular parents and these particular educators communicated, they were transparent, they were on a team, that this child, this boy who's amazing and going to college next year, an awesome college actually, to study, I think he said, I don't think architecture maybe, some kind of technical engineering type architecture, maybe art, something with art for sure. And he was just always one of the kids. He was never any different than any of the other kids because they had done such a great job at integrating his education. And so I guess that's what I will leave you with, is these kids are not any different than any other kids. They just learn differently. So let's help them in every way we can. And if you have any questions, just reach out. If you want the checklist, reach out. If you're not sure if your child learns differently or not, there are so many wonderful evaluators out there who can tell you, and I'm happy to direct you in that way. So with that, we will continue our series on education. Tomorrow we're going to talk about 504 plans, which are the less formal accommodations that can be given to students and supports that can be given to students if they do not meet the criteria for an IEP. And we'll talk about we already talked about the differences, but basically remember that the IEP comes from the IDEA, which all comes from the American Disabilities Act. 504s come from the Civil Rights Act. So that's kind of the difference. at their core as to what they do and how they're enforceable. An IEP is a legal document and a 504 plan is not. So, so with that, we will get into that tomorrow. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful day and be happy. Bye.